I'm recording. So let's remind you when the test is. The final exam schedule are based on when the classes meet. And we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2. That's our main meeting. And classes that meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 have their final on Monday, December 12th at 4. So this will be the same amount of time as our lab period, an hour and 50 minutes. And so we will have the test in a week at 4 o'clock. And it will be classes and objects, and that will be the focus. And we will have in one, you also have to fetch files. So some people fetched the file on the test last week, but you didn't have to, and there were no points for it. But next week there will be points for it. And so you'll have to fetch a file. One of the files will be a file that you must parse. And there'll be another file. So there'll be 2 parts. One will have a file which you will parse, and you will make objects of a class that you make the class. So you will be responsible for making the class. Then you'll read a file, you'll parse the file, and do something with that data. In the other half, you will read a JSON file, and in the JSON file, the class is sort of pre-made. But again, you will fetch the JSON file, read the JSON file, and do something with this. What did I do last week? When I have an array of objects or parallel arrays, very similar. Last week we sort of added to a cart. It was a team, but basic same idea. So I haven't done a search yet, so maybe I will do a search.
That's surprising.
Okay. So
It used to be 13.
let's gonna move on with just today. So there's no new homework, no new lab this week. I would like to give you a week here so you don't have a week to get anything done. The material, I'll have to post this in an announcement, but the labs and homework that are under the new section, the stuff that wasn't covered by test 3, that stuff is all due next Monday night at by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that will play by the normal rules of things being due the day of the test. Of course, you want to do them before the test because you can use the labs on the test. All right. Any questions about when the final is? So it's in this room. It's at that time. It's 2 parts, and both involve arrays of objects. One will be from JSON, one will be a class that you make. Okay. So I have 2 things that we can play around with today. If you have any questions, ask them. And if not, then we can either work on a Hangman game. That's just sort of radio buttons and a little bit about arrays and such. And Hey You is a class, so more like what you might see on the final. So what do you want to do? Hangman. Okay. All right. So I have some head start. It's in the zip file. I unzipped it. I'm grabbing this folder, going to my documents to my 230 folder, pasting it there. And code. And where do I have it? Dogs, no. NFL, no. Matrix loaded, no. Hangman, there it is. So I designed the basic page with all the radio buttons and have an image place to display the word the person's supposed to guess, a button for checking letters, and a next for moving on to the next word. And right now, this just is an alert and says check and next. Okay, so that's what we have so far. And I think I have an array of words and some variables declared. Too many things open. That I'll keep open. All right. And let me close the Explorer, make a little more room, and collapse the style. Okay. So I have, this is my big set of radio buttons. I have the image, and I had a bunch of images of different displays of the hangman being hanged, and a place to display the word, a button that calls check, and a button that calls next. Okay, and I have some words. Okay. So as part of next, I'm going to take the next word. So I started the round counter, which is like the word index, if you will. And it is, I'm going to increment that round counter and then take that word that's at that position. And then I want to create what I call a display word. And that will just be some symbol, maybe asterisks, maybe underscores or something like that, or dashes or something. That will be as many letters as the word. Okay. So that was on next. Okay. So let me comment out the alert. I want to increment round counter. So I'm incrementing the round counter. So I started it off at -1. When I increment it, it's now 0, and I'm ready for the first word. And then I want to take the first word, if I don't, and I might want to come along and in some onload populate, I might want to shuffle these words. But for now, I'll just take them in the order. And I want stars to be as many stars as there are in the word precipitation. I want that to be display word, and then I want to display the display word. So I'm going to loop over the number of characters in words, square bracket, round counter. So are you going to help me? Apparently not. All right, so display word. I'll start off display word as quote, quote. So that will clear out any previous display word because I have a new display word. I'm going to have a for loop over the number of letters in the word. Or let I equals 0, I less than what? The word I'm dealing with, name of the array. That says faux, that's why it's. So the words were words. So I want words. I want words as an array. So I want the index, which was round counter. And then I want the length of that word. How are we going to get the length of a word? How many letters are in a word? How many characters in a word? Dot length. Somebody's test got stuck right there. They forgot dot length and it just sort of like killed them. That was like they couldn't get past the for loop. That was like not in the beginning, but sort of midway through, and it just they did a good job faking, but all right. So now we have our for loop over the number of letters in the word, and I don't want I want my display word to be, I'm just going to say asterisks. So how do I get, if I have a for loop that's going to go repeatedly, you know, if it's a 4-letter word, it's going to be in that loop 4 times. How do I get it to be display word to be 4 asterisks? All going to dismally fail next week. This is early stuff. This isn't anything new. Display plus equal. I started off with nothing, and what do I want to add? I want to add stars. And then I want to, when I'm done the loop, display the display word. So I have a place for that on my page. I have here display word. That's where I want the display word. I have a div, so I could give the div an ID, or I could have a span, put a span in there and work with the span. So do you just want to give the div an ID, or do you want to put a span in there? What makes you happy? Just choose the div. Okay. So let's give the div an ID. And I'll call it div, I'll just say display. And I misspelled it, div display, okay. So now div. And so I want to document get element by ID, div display, .inner HTML, and I want that to be display word. All right. So I click next, and there's my display word, and it's going wrong at some point because I run out of words. So it's complaining to me on 134. It didn't complain. It didn't complain in the beginning, I don't think. No, it's good for a while. And it starts to die because I'm out of words. So I need some kind of protection when I'm out of words. So I have words as an array. So there are two lengths that we're playing with here. There's a length of word of one of the words. That's what we just dealt with. But now I also want to work with the length of the words array. And I want to make sure I don't try to go beyond there. So how are we going to do this? We are going to have, we increment round counter. And do you want when they read the last word? You want to say that's the last word when they starting the last word, or do you want when they try to move to a next word, say sorry, out of words? How do you want to handle it? Do you want to handle it on the last success, or do you want to handle it on the first failure? Or do you want to disable a button so they can't click it? Or do we want an announcement? Do we want an alert? How do we want to handle this end of the game? Disable a button. Okay, so you don't want to enable next after you've run out of words. Now, here's another question for you, because I have two buttons. When a word comes up, for them to play, for them to guess that word, are we going to allow them in the middle of a round to move on to the next word? Or are we going to force them to play that word? Either till they win or till they lose. If we're forcing them to play, here's why it's involved with what you just said. If we force them to play this through until they either win or lose an individual game, then we're disabling next until they finish the round. Got to be careful about not and so then it would be about not re-enabling it. That's right. So if we say there's check and there's next, and check is for playing around, and next is for moving on to the next round. If we say you're saying I want to disable next if there's no next word, I think that makes sense. But if we say that we are going to also disable next while the round is going on and force them to finish the round, then next will already be disabled and our if will be on the usual code that would enable it at the end of a round. Yes, no, maybe. Yes. I don't, it's not a convincing yes. Well, let me just ask this question at this stage. When they're presented with a new word, do we want to force them through that round to win or lose that round? Or are we going to let them to just say, I don't like that word and move on to the next word? Do they have to finish a round? It's our game. We can decide what we want to do. Do you want to force them to finish a round or not? They can move on in the middle of a round. Okay. So then we don't ever disable next. And so we can disable next now to sort of say, okay, there are no more words. Let's disable next. Okay. That's why I needed to know that, to know whether it was if we ever disable next, then if there are two ways of disabling next, we've got to distinguish them. But if in what you just chose, there's only one disabling of next, and that's when we're out of words. So we can do it here in next. Okay. So when the round counter gets to be the length of the array -1, that'll be the last index. That will mean that there are no more words. Yes, no, maybe. So round counter, let's say there were 5 words. Round counter starts at -1, then we click next, and it becomes 0, then it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4. And at 4, we have no more words, and we should disable a button. So it was when the round counter got to be the length, the length of the words array -1. That's when we should disable. So if round counter is equal to words dot length -1, we wanted to disable the next button. Disable the next button. Disable the next button. I need to give that button an ID. Here it is. So I'll call it ID button next. I got my quotes mixed up. So I should be disabling button next. Document get element by ID. Button next. Dot disable, that's the property. And we should set it equal to true. So when the round counter gets to the last of, last available index, then we're going to disable the next button so that they can't move on. All right, so I have my console up. Before I clicked the button enough, I was getting a console error. Now I should disable the button before I get a console error. Next, 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 next. And it's disabled and no errors. Okay, so I have a more graceful ending. I could pop up an alert and say this is the last word if you want as well, or just disabling the button. Okay, so we know how to move to a new word. We may have to come back and tweak it a little bit, but let's talk about check. So what are we going to do in check? How does this game work? How does this game of Hangman work? So I start a round, and what is a user going to do? Select a letter by clicking on a radio button, and then clicking the check button. Okay. Do we want to do anything when they click on the radio button? Or do we just want to wait until they hit check? Just wait. Okay. So now we're in check, and we want to figure out standard stuff, standard radio button stuff. Which radio button did they check? Okay, so we're in check. We have a bunch of radio buttons. They all have the same name, rad letters, so they are grouped. And we have, at least 2 different ways of grabbing the value of the radio buttons. We could loop through them and ask which one's checked, and then get the value of the checked one. And then we have that very shorthandy query selector one, which was like very slick, but sort of confusing for the beginner. So do you want to do it like the loop way? Or do you want to do it the query selector way? So we're going to loop over, I'm going to get the letter that was guessed. So I need a variable for that. Let's just call it guess. And I'll start it off as empty. We're going to get all the radio buttons. Let's call it let radios equals document. We're getting a set of radio buttons. We're getting them, we're getting an array of elements, and this is based on get elements with an S by name. And what was it? Rad letter or rad letters? What was it? Rad letters was the name. So that's the whole set of radio buttons that have that name. And then we're going to loop over that. That I equals 0. I less than what radios dot length, because that is an array, I plus plus. And then we're going to ask if radios I, the ith element of the radios array, if that's checked. Can't spell. If radios I dot checked, then I want my guess is the value of radios I. So they were grouped by the name. We got a whole array of radios. We're looping over the radios. We're asking which radio is checked. We're setting its value. We're setting guess equal to its value. And then let's just alert it to see if we have the guess. Let's alert the guess. Let's see how far we've got. So let's say T, I'll guess T, and there it is T. And then I'll guess L, and there it is L. And then let me start again, refresh the page, and what if I didn't choose a letter? Oh, there's a problem. So I might like to say, if they didn't choose a letter, say choose a letter and return and get out and not do anything else. So I'm going to say I set alert equal to quote, quote, and then I set it equal to some letter. But if it never was equal to any, if they didn't choose a radio button and it's never one of the letters, then we'll do what? We'll say if yes still is quote, quote, we'll alert and say, I don't know, please choose a letter. And we'll return, because we're going to start putting the letters into the displayed word, and we're not going to do that if they don't choose a letter. Now, how do we want to handle, they have guessed a letter. They're smart and they're going to guess the letter E, because E is in a lot of words. It's the most common letter. And so they've guessed an E, and we want to prevent them from guessing E again if they've already guessed E. Doesn't matter whether it's in the word or not. If they guess it, I want to not allow them to repeat that guess. I can disable the radio button. So I can take radio I and set its disabled property to true. So here's where I find out if the radio button was checked. And I can set its disabled property to true. Let's see that. Build up slowly. Okay, so here we have what? I don't make a guess. It says choose a letter, and I can't spell letter. Okay, but if I guess a letter, let's guess the S here, then it is disabled. But if I click check again, I don't know what just happened. See, S, it's still selected. I would like to unselect it. How would I unselect? I would like to disable it and unselect it.
+1 of I keep not checking this. So radio.
I could do it by checking some other radio button. That's true. And then I have to worry if that radio button has or has not been disabled. But I don't want to do that. I just want to deselect the current radio button.
Unchecked. Side unchecked, see the plus.
Yes.
Oh.
You were saying the right words, but he told me the right code. Yes. So let's see. All right, so I choose the letter S. And it is disabled and unchecked, or checked equals false is the correct code here. And so I guess some letters, blah, here's J, here's F. I'm terrible at this game, Z, all right. Now here's a problem. I'm going to move on to the next word. What's the problem? What's the next word? I moved on to the next word. And I have letters that are disabled from the previous round. I need to, when I start a new round. So now I got to jump back to next and fix this issue in next. I need to enable all the radio. So jumping back down to next, we're going to loop over the radio buttons and make sure they're all checked. Disabled equals, we'll uncheck them and we will enable them. So those are both the words and aren't really the right words. Okay, so let's grab our loop over radio buttons. So always cheat when you can, right? So down here in next, here's my loop over the radio buttons. I don't care which ones are checked or unchecked. I want to, what do I want to do? I want to make sure they're all enabled and none of them are checked. So radios, and I want them to be enabled. So what's the code? Not disabled equals false. I lost my equal. And I want them to all be unselected. radius I. What? Starting a new round. I don't want any of the radial buttons to be disabled, and I don't want any of the buttons to be selected. What's the property of whether it's selected or not? Got checked. Thanks for your help. And I want it to be true or false? False. All right, so I guess some letters. I have a problem right now is that I'm guessing letters and I'm not even in a round yet. So we got to deal with that. But I've guessed some letters and I move to the next round. So T and V and I, now they're available again. Nobody's selected and nobody's disabled. One of them is T, I can get T again. Okay. All right. Now we have to find out they guess a letter, we have to find out if the letter is in the word, and if the letter is in the word, we need to sort of put it into display. So I have my letter, I have guess, I have words, I know what the word is because it's words, square bracket, round counter. And so if the word was precipitate or precipitation, that was the first word, precipitation, and let's say they guessed I, then I need to come along here and make it star, 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 I, star, I, star, 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 I, star, star. I need to, wherever the, I find the letter, to replace that letter in the display word with a star. All right. There are two approaches. It's a search. Right? We're looking for something in a bigger something. We're looking for a letter within a word. It's a search. Okay, so a search, there's one way to always do a search is to loop and have an if in the loop. It's always a way that we can do a search. Okay. And then I have a problem. I always have a problem. My words were in small letters and my values were in capital letters. Okay, but I'm going to perform a search and then I'm going to do something when I have it. So it's like, so let's just have a comment. Search for guess in words round counter. A search is a search is a search. A search is a loop with an if inside. I'm looking for some condition and I'm going to check in all of these words. So that is a search or a search. A search. Okay. So I'm going to, and then there was the built-in search of index of. You can play with index of, that's a built-in search for you, but let's do the old-fashioned loop through the word, loop through the letters in the word, and see if they match, guess, and then do something. So I'm going to loop for let I equals 0. I'm looping through the letters in the word, so I less than words round counter dot length. It's this same loop than I had here. Okay. So I want the letter of I want the ith letter of words round counter. And I want to compare it to guess. Let's just console log for a second and see what's going on here. And I want to console log the ith letter of words round. So I have words round counter. In square bracket I. So a string, a word, a string can be thought of as sort of an array of characters. So I just want to see the letters popping out of my word. And then I'm going to ask if the letter matches guess, then we need to do something. All right. So here we go. I'm just console logging. And I'm going to guess some letter D. I'm going to hit check. And I have an on-caught error. So it doesn't like 143. Doesn't like the length of this. Okay. Why not? I liked it before. Oh, because I think I know why. Because I don't have a round counter yet. So I need to deal with the fact. Let me start again. Let me hit next and actually start the game. And now let me do it. D and check. Now I'm better. So here are the individual words of precipitation spelled out. Okay. So I have my display word. I have my actual word. And if the guessed letter matches the letter of the word, I want to update display word to display the letter. And I need to do some uppercasey kind of crap. So if what? If words round counter I, that was the letter, is equal to a guess, then I want to do something else. I want to do something else. And I need this to be, let's put them both in uppercase, just to be sure. 2 uppercase. Or let's see, 2 uppercase and 2 uppercase. So it's a case insensitive search. Okay. So I want to change my display word if. So the display word is as long as round count. So if I'm thinking of round counter as an array of characters, then the display word is a parallel array. It's got as many letters. And so I'm going to, what do I want to do? I want to, if the word, the letter if the ith letter matches the guess, then I want to shove the letter into display word. So I had precipitation. And I come along and I find that the I in precipitation matches the guess letter I. So then I want to do take whatever there was before, and then the I and whatever there is after. And in the display word, I want to put the letter in. All right. So we have substrings. We have a notion, when you have a string, you have the notion of a substring. Let's remind you, we've looked at this once before, but it's been a while. JavaScript substring. So the letter is, the first one is a position. And then it is, so sometimes the second letter is another position, and sometimes it's a length. For us, the length will be a 1. Okay, so I want, let's just console log. And let's console log round counter. And dot substring I. Let's see what that is. So if I take the substring and I start at I, what have I got? As always, I'm going to guess it's precipitation. I'm going to guess R. And I'm going to do a check. And it doesn't like, oh, I did that same thing again. I got to deal with this issue of the beginning. There's not a word at the beginning. So I'm going to guess R. It was P-R-E. So R was the second letter. And when I hit check, here was the precipitation. So I get that from that position on. I don't want from that position on. I want from that position. So I'm interested in two other things. I'm interested in that letter on. Next, let me do the E this time. And there it is, the rest of the word after the E, first E that it finds. So it finds the E and then it gives me the rest of the word. What if I did this? What if I did 0 up to I? What does that give me? I'm going to comment this one out. And I'm out of time, but let's do the E. And I do the check. I did that again. Next, E. And when it finds the E, it gives me the, so let me do next, do E again, check. There were no E's. Let me do an O. And the word was psychotic, and I have psych, and I have tick. So I know how I can get the beginning of the word and I can get the end of the word, and I can get everything but the letter. So I can put in, I know how much of the word comes before that letter, how much of the word comes after that letter, and I need to work with the display word instead of the actual word for an amount of time. So if I use this, again, the display word and the word are parallel arrays. So I can get information. This substring, I could work with the display word instead. So if I were to substitute this, the display word, and this the display word, and shove in the letter, I would be substituting the right letter into the display word. And then I need to display the display word. We'll play more if you want, or we can play some other game on Wednesday. Tomorrow, there is not a new lab that will be due. I was asked to post some practice tests, so everybody's welcome to come and catch up on homework and labs. If you are caught up on homework and labs, you don't have to be here, but if you want to be here, I will post some things for you to practice on. And I already did, because I posted the Hey You, which is like one part of the final. All right. Stop recording.